Hi, good afternoon. It's about 4:30-ish Sunday afternoon. Ordinarily, I'm done with this on Saturday, but been very extremely busy the last few weeks, and have kind of landslided in and around me. So I actually don't usually work on Sundays, as most of you know. But now that the Giant game is over and they have won, and the Yankee game isn't on until later, I can take the rest of my Sunday to myself later on. And I'm smiling because so far things are pretty good as far as at least the Giants are concerned, although I have my doubts about the Yankees. At any rate, you don't care about any of that. You watch these videos because you want to absorb all my wisdom and because you want to be provoked by the points that I make. I know that. I know that. And so I'll just move forward with that. Uh, Housekeeping. First of all, I've evaluated all of your midterms. Very good. All good. And I wasn't surprised by that because all of you have stepped up all the way through. So they were all quite good, not quite good. I apologize to I think two of you wondered about whether the specific expectations of the midterm were, and as I pointed out to both of them, I had done that verbally by way of a video on the 19th of September, and I thought that was more than sufficient to speak to the expectations of the midterm. And certainly any of you, all of you, including the two folks who asked about that, seem to have stepped up to the plate and responded to those points well. Here's what I heard from the midterms assignments. All of you lambasted the needs assessment failures of Scott Rock's leadership. And others of you don't, all of you lambasted that, and rightfully so. Many of you rewrote the schedule, which I thought was interesting. None of them were quite the same, but you all certainly had your ideas about how things should be. So they were all interesting and thoughtful and creative. So and I agreed with you on virtually everything. A couple of you, trying to remember, there was a couple of points. There was nothing I had negative at all to say about any of them. Some folks heavily delved into the follow-up, which I thought was very thoughtful, because you only the whole process that you have criticized or evaluated is a better word to use, were a real actual case, would only have benefit from the follow-ups that you spoke to. And I presume from, I think it's chapter 6, that you have recognized that everything has to be somehow evaluated qualitatively and quantitatively. A couple of you mentioned surveys in the needs assessment, and a couple of you mentioned surveys in the follow-up. And I, as I've said a couple of times already, and I can't say it enough times, having been a quantitative researcher most of my professional career, is that surveys are dangerous things if you don't do them well. I may have said this to you before. I use this expression when I'm teaching face to face, and this might offend people, and I apologize if it offends you. No, but I think about a survey question that's really silly, and silly is the wrong word. Invalid is probably a better word to use. If I said to you on a scale, and any of you were offended by this, please know I'm not trying to offend anybody. If I said to you on a scale of 1 to 5, meaning 1 as never and 5 as always, when did you stop beating your pet? Terrible thing, because it speaks to abuse. And someday I'll think of a better example. But that's a terrible item in a survey. You run into surveys like that. Think about some of the surveys you hear about, political surveys, and even commercials. Thousands of dentists say use toothpaste. Well, hello, how hard is that? And how many thousands out of how many thousands did you ask that of? Well, dangerous pieces. That's why a survey is okay, but a survey needs to be validated statistically, and its reliability has to be evaluated as well. And validity means that it actually asks for the issues that you ask about it, that it's not some other, it doesn't make respondents think it's about something else. Happens all the time, by the way. And reliability is about what it sounds like. If the survey were administered 100 times to 100 different groups, would the results be more or less consistent, assuming that the samples are the same? And if they go all over the place, I mean, there's something wacky about how the survey was written. Again, not wrong to use surveys. It's just something I throw a yellow flag up of caution about all that. So I'm sure I'm knowing I'm leaving some things out. I wrote comments to everybody on the Blackboard, and we're done. We're done with that. I'm pleased to be able to say I've gotten something done lately. I've also finished all of the discussion questions, responses that I've gotten to date. Although it looks like quite a few are missing in the most current week. But I just, at least as of Sunday morning. But I will say that I'm caught up. And as soon as I see the other ones, I will respond to them as well. So I'm caught up. He smiled, which is typically how I can say something to a class. And I'm pleased about that. And more importantly, I'm pleased with the midterms, because now I can tell that you're primed for the last assignment, the 40 percenter. And we'll speak to that in a second. I just wanted to mention that the discussion question is up on the syllabus. I changed it a little bit because I didn't like the way it was written. In fact, it was inaccurate. And I made it broad. And so what it is we're in chapter 8. We're going to speak to that in a few minutes. We're in chapter 8. And I love talking about chapter 8. We're going to do a little bit of today of chapter 8, and we're going to probably seep over into next week about chapter 8 premises. At any rate, the book has terrific discussion questions at the end of every chapter. And I in my whole, professor career, 53 years of this, I've never used a question at the end of a chapter that I can remember. It doesn't mean I haven't, but I very rarely have done that because I'd rather make up my own questions than take something out of a can. But I thought I'd sort of give you a wild card for this particular chapter. And essentially what I'm saying is there's, I don't know how many discussion questions at the end of chapter 8. And I'm saying, pick one you want to speak to, and basically comment about something that you'd like to know more about. Because now that chapter 8 gets into new territory, not new, but new enough territory. And then some of you have mentioned it. Sasha, I think, said this, when she talked about automated response kinds of things. When we're talking about using technology to assist in our training needs, that's a whole ball of wax. That's a moving target to think about. And as we begin to think about that more closely, as the course comes around the corner and heads toward the finish line, I thought I'd give you a chance to tell me what you would want to know more about. Now, I am not promising you that I'll be able to answer what you want to know more about premise, but I promise to try. So let's try that out, see where that goes. I'm looking for your thoughtfulness, and I'm enjoying your responses to other people. Sometimes I do. At every course where I require that people respond to other people's comments, virtually every time except this class, I get people posting up. That was a really great idea, Johnny. And they count that as if they're really responding to what the person may have said, but not in your cases. Some of you, all of you really kind of peel back other points of view, respond to them. You're using research. You're using research beyond the book, which again I happen to think is a terrific book, but it's not the only answer to all of your prayers in terms of learning what you need to do to learn to be an outstanding human resource manager in the third decade of the 21st century, as we accelerate toward whatever it is, whatever emerging futures we think are probably in front of us. And by the way, consider whether those emerging futures are the futures that you prefer. And I'll talk more about that as we move through the last couple of weeks here. So that's a discussion question. It's posted in the syllabus, and you know what to do with that. The midterm is in the bank, as I said. Now, I'm going to bring up the syllabus for a moment. I probably told you the first day I met you that I don't like syllabi. I started to see. I did answer that. I'm sorry. I don't like syllabi because syllabi, in my head, are often too inflexible. So I like to be able to move off the syllabus if I think I want to, if I think there's something important to deal with. And I sometimes use a syllabus. Where's my syllabus? Give me another second. I sometimes don't like to use syllabi, but in this case I will, because sometimes people need that as a structure for them to work from. So here we go. I'm just bringing up one point, and there's a major, for those of you asked about this in terms of the midterm, there's a major gap in this that I will speak to in a moment. Someone asked me about how they were doing in the assignment as far as grades were concerned, and I really said there's 3 grades. You know, there's 3 grades. Here they are. One is 30 points for your discussion board, which is about 10 times 3. I really can't even think of a time when I've taken any points off anybody's discussion responses, as long as you're responding. If you're not responding, you're not getting the points. But if you're responding, you're getting 30 points towards your final grade. Then there's 30 points for the midterm, which I just posted up in the as of this morning. And then there's 40 points for the applications question, sometimes called the final exam. It's not really a final exam, but if that word works for you better than applications paper, that's fine. In the end, you have an applications paper to do for me. Now this, by the way, is off the top of my bald head. If you remember to do this, I'd appreciate it. Please double space when you type. These old eyes have trouble reading the computer screens when everything is squeezed together. And well, I don't really want to talk about the number of days, number of pages you have to have in this assignment. It's an extension of the midterm. A couple of you, and you know who you are, I like to point you out, but I don't want to embarrass you in a positive way. A couple of you have already begun to do this without even being asked to do it. And that is to say, this assignment, if you look at it, is to right down here. Is it right here? You will apply the concepts learned in the course to a specific organization. Details on the paper are available right now in the assignment section of the Blackboard. If you like, you can begin now to think about the organization to use, and you can actually begin to work on the paper throughout the course. You're ready to do that. Again, some of you have already begun to do that for one reason or another, and well. So let's take the positive first. I'm telling you to take an organization, any organization. There's plenty of organizations described in the book. You can do that if you'd like. There are organizations that are public organizations or government issues or other, but just about anything you can choose. As long as you walk it past me, I'm going to approve. So, or you can talk about the place where you are now. So if you're working for a business, a nonprofit, or whichever, by all means, use that if you want. If you want to do that, that's absolutely fine with me. And what you're going to do is take the concepts of this paper, that we've learned through about a week or 2 from now, to redesign the HRM system, especially in terms of what we've discussed in this class. Now, that's the plus. Now, the minus for the moment today is where it says details on the paper are available in the assignment section. They are not there. They will be there tomorrow, Monday night. They will be there tomorrow night. And I will probably speak to them if you're able to get online with me tomorrow night. Optionally, a person said they just can't meet on Mondays, and again, you're not getting, no one's getting bonus points for being there, and no one's certainly getting zeros for not being there. I mean, very, very light participation from that. I'm bothered about it on one level, but I understand everyone has obligations, personal and professional obligations that, or academic ones that you just don't think you need to meet by sitting in on me with that one night. What I typically do there is I get on at 6. If no one's there by 6:20, 6:25, I get off. And I always say, and this is being recorded, anytime anybody wants to find me, you call me, you text me, you FaceTime me, you Facebook me. I don't like to be Facebooked. You FaceTime me, you TomTom me, you send me a carrier pigeon, and you text me if I didn't say that already. You Zoom me, and I will respond to you as rapidly as I can. Pay money for this course. You're entitled to my professional responses to you. But what I will do tomorrow, with people there or without, is I will post suggested guidelines for this. I'm not going to say they're the required one. I'm going to suggest guidelines to enact this paper. Okay, so that's not in today's presentation. It will be in Monday nights in the optional piece. And again, if you come there, you can make suggestions. If you don't, you can make suggestions to me anyway, by way of email, whichever, and I'll certainly listen to those ideas. But essentially, what you're going to do is design your HR needs assessment and training programs from front to back. So, I mean, front to back means starting from needs assessment, I would imagine, up through whatever technology you want to use, because that's pretty much the end of the content piece of what this semester is about. I keep forgetting that this semester finishes, I think, November 10th. So today is what, the 15th, 16th. So it's about 3 weeks away. So you have about 3 weeks to work on this. I'm not looking for 50 pages, but I'm looking for enough pages to meet the need. But I'll try to sculpt the guidelines for you to give you more guidance on that. So no, there are no guidelines today. Yes, there will be guidelines tomorrow, barring some kind of, heaven forbid, that prevents me from doing it. But you're going to get it very soon. All right. And what I'm going to do in the next 3 weeks on Monday nights, and on Sundays too, when I post this, but either both days, more likely than not, I'm going to say, continue to flesh this out, give you points to think about, and so forth. But the hardest part for you right now, I think, is to pick the organization you want. By the way, if you want me to pick one for you, I will do that. But what I will pick may not be one that you're all that familiar with, and then you have to kind of scramble to get your arms around what that particular organization is about. So I'll do it for you if that's what you like. But I think you're better off choosing something that you think you know something about, whether it's a personal experience or something that you've read about, or anything in between. So to back up to the top again, your midterms are graded. They're in the Blackboard evaluation section. I haven't evaluated the discussion questions yet, and all I'm really evaluating them for is whether you've answered the question, because the quality of the responses are all threes. The only thing that's may hurt you now, was if you didn't respond for one reason or another. A couple of you had some excuses that you need to remind me about that I might wonder about. And I will follow up with you anyway if you're missing any significant number of those. So those are the two grades you have: midterm and discussion so far. So you have discussion points so far, and you have the midterm. The third piece will be this paper I just alluded to. It's due in about 3 weeks. And I've already given you the discussion question for this coming week. And I've already given you a very fast overview of the final exam. I keep calling it a final exam. It's called the applications paper, and move on. And again, feel free to post a question to me, and I will come back to you on that. Okay, so we're through with that. Now, what I want to do now is, I wish I had thought about doing this sooner, but what I did last week was the same idea I'm taking this week on a slightly different twist. I like to drop back to punt and then go back and then go forward, to use a football term, on a football Sunday. And so I've said talking too much. So I'm going to go back into 7 for just a few minutes. Let me find the PowerPoint. And then we'll go forward into 8. Okay, this is about as simple as you can get on the first PowerPoint. Looking back at chapter 7, which I thought was an extremely important point about looking closely at the training strategies that you use. Watch my hands, where the strategies and the goals mesh up, and considering the array, the spectrum, the rainbow, whatever word you want to, that works for you, of options that you have or the combination of options that you have to use in any number of combinations to approach training your employees, your fellow stakeholders, your colleagues, whomever you've been charged with thinking about this, requires a lot of thought. Now, I'm reminding you about two pyramids. The first one, I'm not going to bring up a slide about it at this moment. The first pyramid, the first triangle, went back a couple of chapters when we talked about what we called Bloom's taxonomy. But we said that Bloom's taxonomy had divided learning into 7 layers, starting with knowledge and working its way all the way up to creativity. We said that the bottom 4, which would be knowledge, understanding, application, I'm leaving one out, but those are the 3 I can think of right now, as lower order thinking skills. Nothing wrong with lower order thinking, with lower order thinking skills, especially if that's what you want your trainees to be able to master. Nothing wrong with that at all. I just wanted to make the distinction between the lower order thinking skills, the LOTS, versus the higher order thinking skills, which would be the HOTS, HOTS, higher order thinking skills. And they begin with, forgive me, I'm having drawing a blank on one there too, but analysis, breaking things into parts, okay? Evaluation, ranking, prioritizing, evaluating, judging about, deciding about X versus Y. And then the tip of the triangle being creativity, where people take everything that went before from the bottom of the triangle up, and they recreate what they're doing. In a sense, your applications paper is a synthesis question, because I'm telling you now, recreate an organization's HR system. How would you recreate it? And I emphasized last time through, if I'm not mistaken, the value of what's a buzzword I don't like to use too often, but I'm suspecting many of you are familiar with, which would be design thinking. I don't like that word. It's too much of a cliche, but it is what it sounds like. Where people have finally begun to realize that it's important to give employees the opportunity to think what we call laterally. Sometimes we say right brain, which is really misleading. Laterally, creatively, to think about a lot of ideas, take those same lots of ideas, and then to be able to elaborate on what they mean, and then to perhaps flexibly twist them around, maybe put them together so that they become original. I'm talking too fast. That's about original creative thinking. That's about design thinking. And I would suggest strongly that you weave that premise somehow into the applications paper that you're talking about, because that's really what this application paper is. I'm telling you, recreate Disney World. Recreate a baseball team. Recreate the company you work for. Recreate the church you attend. Recreate the government that we suffer under or enjoy. Okay, that's what the application paper is about. So at any rate, let's go back to the point. What I wasn't able to do, because I didn't have the technological competency. I have a lot of technological competency in most things, and some things I just don't have, and this is one of them. Also because the textbook I'm working from is an electronic one. I'm using a Kindle with that. You may see me looking over at it now and then. And so I can't lift something and paste it to a PowerPoint page without probably getting into some kind of legal troubles. And also because I don't know how to do it. But you can't copy and paste it from that. So I didn't do that. So what you need to do is go into your version of the book, whether it be an electronic version or whether it be a hard copy. And I don't know the page numbers because Kindle is different from hard copies. And as you're in chapter 7, you need to look at, I would suggest strongly that you look at 7 point, the graphic on that's entitled 7.4. All right. To me, this particular graphic is the best graphic in that chapter, and it gives you the whole with a W. Gets its arm around the whole elephant of the issues and the variables that have to be considered in order to integrate all those points to make something work properly. So I'm just going to walk you through it. Hopefully, you have a chance to, as I'm talking to you, to just open up the chapter 7, however you have able to do that, and to sort of walk along with me. You'll see that the center of the diagram has arrows going to strategies. Now, we've already talked about that heavily for the last week or two when we talk about strategies, ways to hit the goals as cross training, coordination training, team leader training, which we haven't talked about a whole lot yet. We will. Guided team self-correction and scenario-based training. And I ain't going to hit you hard with that in another week or so. Now, those strategies are the consequence of tools. The tools are, several of you spoke about this in your midterm, team task analyses, measurement goals. A lot of you did a good job with that. Task simulation and exercises. I did that. I shouted for emphasis. I believe I said this already, and I'll be saying it again. Forgive me for being arrogant, but I consider myself an expert on simulation design. Done a lot of it. It's really one of the reasons why I put my feet on the ground in the morning is designing simulations. A simulation is role playing within a game setting. Okay, so you just can't play Goldilocks or the Papa Bear and say, "Oh, I'm simulating." You're role playing, but you're not simulating unless you're working within a certain set of rules. I mean, this is a terrible example. So if Goldilocks I don't want to be a wise guy. If Goldilocks is doing something criminal, besides, by the way, being criminally breaking into the Three Bears house, nobody thinks about that, but she should have been thrown into jail for that. That might be against the rules of the activity. You have to stay within the rules of the activity. If you're playing a Monopoly and you land on go to jail, go directly to jail, you've got to go to jail. You're playing a wheelbarrow or a dog or whatever little piece that you are, or if you're playing a video game and the dragon breathes fire on you, you die because that's the rules of the game. You're simulating a dragon fighter, but if you do the wrong thing, or rather within the scope of the game, you suffer the consequences, or you enjoy a reward as such. So the tools piece, that box clearly contributes to what kind of strategies you're going to use, as well as the connection or the relationship between tools and methods. And the methods are, now you got to think about this for a moment, whether they're information-based, whether there's content you want your learners to learn, or whether there's skills that it's a little different now between one and the other. So you may want to use a demonstration-based video, or you may want to give practice basing to have that all come together. What I call guided practice. Another word for guided practice is modeling. We really, those of you who think apprenticeships and mentoring are great strategies, understand this instinctively. Good mentors model. Apprentices must model what the mentor is showing them. It's a very effective strategy up to a certain point as such. So we take tools on the one hand, we take methods on the other hand, all the things we spoke about, and we run those arrows back down into the center, which would be strategies, which I've already spoken to. And then you come down through strategies to the coordination with the team objectives, the learning objectives for the group. We've spoken about that quite a few times. And then coming out of those objectives would be the content. Now, my content's broadly speaking, we're talking about knowledge. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 is knowledge. This is how you turn the lug nut, is knowledge. This is how you speak to a client who's not happy, is knowledge. However, there also are skills that go with how you talk to that client, or how you trace the map where Columbus may have gone, and so forth. And then what gets overlooked and shouldn't be overlooked is the premise of attitudes. I call them dispositions. So when you go to Disney World, I think I said I claim to be an expert on Disney World. And you go up to whom they call a cast member, and you say, you know, I am not happy about this, and that other thing. The cast member doesn't say, well, that's really too bad, and turns her back on you and walks away. They are trained, okay, to want to help you, amazingly enough. I was really twisted about something a couple of years ago, and I don't want to bore you with the whole story. And I got so mad, I walked out of the Magic Kingdom with my wife and was heading back to the hotel. When I got on the ferry to go back, and the ferry captain saw me standing there. I must have had one of pardon my French, my pissy faces on. And he came up to me, he says, oh, you don't look happy. I said, no, I'm not. I said, this is what happened. This is what happened. And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a piece of some pad. And he basically gave my wife and me free passes to several rides without having to wait on the whole 300-hour-long rides. To wait online, gave them to us. Now that's a person who's been trained to take care of the people that he's serving, and that's what Disney is well known for. So that whole piece of the main elements on 7.4 talks about the structure of team training. I think it's a very strong setup to make you look through this. And I wanted to also point out that the author of that graphic is Salas and Bowers, Ken and Bowers, and they are both well-known authors in this area. So I would say this is a particularly strong premise to take to mind, perhaps as you begin to design your own training system. Now, the other graphic I wanted to point out is on, again, I can't tell you the page. Oh, where is it? I'm trying to find it on my Kindle. And for some reason, the Kindle won't let me, it's making me read it sideways. So just work with me for a minute. It's 7.11. A great summary. A great summary. I'm going to see. Forgive me. Okay. Thank you. And you can see how it's take a hard look at that, because it's got all of the different potential presentation strategies you can consider, or mixes thereof, all the way from lecture, lower order thinking skill, but it has value if you're in a hurry. And we talked about this through videos and on-the-job training, all the way over to what we call action learning. And then what it does is it breaks it down across learning outcomes, learning environments, and how and the cost of making this happen. Some of them are pretty expensive, and some of them are pretty cheap. So if you have a budget, you may want to dominate your training planning with lectures. It won't be as effective, but it will be within the budget that you're working with. So the effectiveness piece connected to the cost piece is a big issue here. So this does a nice job with this, and I would recommend strongly that you use this particular chart as you begin to consider how you want to move forward with the this applications paper, as well as solidify what you think you learned. I'm just trying to fix my Kindle. Forgive me for a minute. By way of chapter 7. So enough said about that. It's really a terrific chapter. They all are. And now I will move to chapter 8. Let's watch a little video for a second.
The thing that's different about a Vrbo vacation home, you always have the whole place to yourself.
Sam is in for an operation. Make him better or get the buzzer. Hey everyone, this is Maria with TTPM. Here we have the classic game of Operation with doctor cards and classic ailments. Our patient Sam has a lot of problems and is in for a you up for the challenge? This is a really fun game that can be played with all ages. The goal is to remove all the ailments with a set of tweezers and avoid getting buzzed. The more ailments you cure, the more points you get to win the game.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you wanted to watch the whole thing, and I'm hoping that, of course, your days as children, you had an opportunity to play Operation. Operation is a game. Operation is a simulation of operating on a patient. It's a simulation, as just about every toy is, as every book that you read or a movie that you watch or video game that you play. They're all simulations. They're all versions of simplified reality. The beauty of a simulation is you can kill this patient and the patient really doesn't die. We know that. I can, play Star Wars with you and say, I'm Luke Skywalker and you're Darth Vader, his father, in case you don't know. And as you push him off the ladder, and he yells, "I'm your father," and he falls down to oblivion. He doesn't really die. That's the beauty. That's what a big part of what our lives are about: living in simulations, varieties of them. We just don't necessarily recognize it as that. Now, this particular chapter is about technology-based training. This is technology, however, simple it is. I mean, it's basically, if you use the tweezers to pull out this patient's heart, and you hit the metal piece, it's going to buzz, and you're going to kill the patient. Again, I'm oversimplifying. That's technology. If you use a video game, and again, the dragon gets you before you get it, you're using a much more sophisticated piece of that, and everything in between, all the social media, all the other premises we're about to talk about, are all the sum of what this chapter calls technology-based training methods. And I urge you to take a look at the objectives. I would call them goals, by the way. I don't think they're really written as objectives. And I'm not going to read all of them to you. I'm presuming that you will have read this yourself. The first one says, explain how new technologies are influencing training. That's what we're about to begin to play with together. And all the way through the 9th objective, which would be something you would be required to speak to if you think about it, were you to go into your boss and say, well, I want to throw out everything we're doing and I want to come up with a online training system. And you might very well be asked, and rightfully, validly be asked, well, explain to me the benefits of it, what we call an LMS, Learning Management System. And everything in between speaks to those premises as well. Speaks to web-based training, speaks to social media, speaks to distance learning, and really, quite obviously, what we're doing together as co-learners in this group. Let me go back to this for a second. We're obviously learning together about how to figure out where these go and whether they're worth it. Let's be honest too. Sometimes technology is about a chorus line. It looks good, and flashing lights and music and all kinds of acrobatics on the stage, but it may not mean much. And sometimes people jump into a new strategy as what I call the flavor of the month. A phrase I use sometimes as well as the innovation du jour. All of us can think about social media platforms that have come and gone. Remember, there was something called MySpace once. I can't even think of all the other ones that don't exist because they were either overrun by or supplanted by better technologies as we continue to evolve these kinds of things. And so, just to walk into your boss and say, I have the newest way we can train everyone to be the best client, customer client support people ever. Does that mean you're going to walk in with a robot and the robot's going to be angry or happy or sad, and you're going to have the person interact with? That might sound really good, but how well programmed was that so-called artificially intelligent robot programmed to deal with every issue that's out there? So these are all issues to think about. So I wanted to point out there's several several graphics in this one before I get more technically into some of these other slides I want to talk about. And the first one would be, can't find it. I don't know why I can't find 8.1. I had it before, but so we'll skip that one with my apologies. That's just down here. Nope. So let's go over to 8.2. So don't worry about 8.1. And what this little graphic speaks to us, some things that are already passé. It speaks to webcasts and webinars. I myself very involved with doing webinars and podcasts because it's a kind of what we're doing right now. It's a way to get information across to people, and if they're set up technologically correctly, a way to interact with people to respond to your points from across great distances. And after the fact as well, which is a very solid case of that. There's podcasts. You're talking to a podcast junkie. There's so many podcasts you can listen to in your car, in the gym, as you're walking somewhere. Very convenient to work with. Now, in a certain sense, a podcast is nothing more than a radio, or unless it's also a visual one, and you can watch it on your device. But podcast is just another way to deliver information that's convenient and very flexible too. I like that a lot. Mobile learning is what it sounds like. I use a mobile device like a smartphone, and I do things with it. What's the name of that one? Artificial reality, where you can hold your iPhone at a cage in a zoo and see the animals. The animals aren't in the cage, but when you put the camera on it, you'll see video animals in the cage. Now, I'm not sure what the value of that is, except the fact that poor animals aren't locked up in a cage. That's an advantage, I suppose. But in all of the different flexible and ways to use blended learning, rather mobile learning, really just limited by our imagination and the extent of the technology we have to make it happen. I bought a couple of years ago, I don't know what you call it, virtual reality helmet. It's a funny story I won't go into. I wanted to be able to use it for a number of things. I wanted to design some things with those helmet things, and I couldn't figure out how to do it, quite frankly. But I know my grandson had a boxing program on there, so I put it on. I put the helmet on, and I immediately got nauseous, and I've never used it again. But you do know that those virtual reality things are out there. Google's coming out with glasses pretty soon. I think Apple is too. So mobile learning is just only limited by the extent to which the technology enables us to do that. And generally speaking, the technology is sometimes good enough to get to market, but often takes several years to really become perfected. So we're talking about mobile learning. We're talking about blended learning, which is part of what I would recommend that you consider if you're going to do recreate your HR systems, because it's got the advantages of using web-based approaches, as well as the advantages of having people personally involved with each other to deliver information to each other. Wikis are old hat, but wikis are described there. A wiki is a website that you can contribute to. Most famous of them, I suppose, is the Wikipedia. And the danger of that is that people can abuse that and actually lead you down paths that are not accurate. But if you had a sort of an in-house closed wiki where workers could contribute to each other in a community board, it's a great source of taking care of business as such. And there's distance learning, which is what we're doing right now. We know what that is, which consists of all these other things we're talking about. So that chart is nothing. It also talks to social media, which is a blessing and a curse. I think I'm not going to read all of these basic premises, but I point out the value of what this is all about. There's a lot of great ideas here, a tremendous amount of ideas, and I urge you to consider which of these might align with the training goals that you have for your study. Don't try to bite off something that you don't know anything about, unless you mean to learn more about it. But if something that you think you have some experience with, or you're attracted to, this would give you a great baseline to start from. There's also that chart on 8.6, 8.1 is after 8.2. I just realized. So I'm going to skip over that. But it talks about the types of learning environments, classroom, technological, or blended. Does a nice job with that. So just don't glance at that. Take a close look at it because they're different. They look like they're just a bunch of boxes with arrows, but they are different. You may want to decide which one of those more nearly aligns with the systems that you want to design. I go over to 8.6. This is a pretty simple one. And basically, this talks about the principles that you need to consider for creating a positive online experience. Now, for example, I said that I design simulations. I have a simulation I'm trying to design where I want to make it online. And I'm doing because I know it's a great simulation, but I also doing it not well. I'm not doing it well because I don't know how to create an online experience. I don't know how to do the technological part. If you know how, give me a buzz. But really what you need to do is consider about all those premises. So if you wanted to design a strictly online system for your client, your trainees to learn a set of skills or content, that's very attractive. But again, I would not go forward on that unless you took a good look at what those chapters speak to, what this particular table speaks to. Because it's done well. And this is by Clark and Mayer, and they're very good, actually. Also good people to take a look at. There's one other one I wanted to point out. That would be 8.7. Also, now this speaks to social media. Now, I have mixed feelings about social media personally and professionally, but I wouldn't lie to you. I would lie to you if I said I think I'm on Facebook a couple times a day, just to just to lament the Yankees and things like that. I don't get too much more deeply into it. I really don't want to know whether somebody had a pork chop for dinner last night, which is what a lot of what Facebook seems to be about. I see Twitter as a more powerful tool to learn. And there are other social media platforms that you might be familiar with. I mean, I know TikTok. I don't subscribe to it, but I know it by way of my grandchildren. I know Instagram. I think Instagram's got some power because of its visual emphasis, but I don't know how to do that. But the issue with the social media, positive or negative, is the issue of community. What I tried to do with this group, right, this class, was to create a community among you. I was only partially successful. By that, I mean to say, you all step up to the requirement of responding to each other, and you encourage each other and give people advice. No question about that. That's the definition of a supportive community. I was also hopeful that there would be ways for you to communicate with each other about this application paper that you're doing, for example. And I encourage you to do that because there's nothing wrong with saying person X says to person Y, what are you thinking about? I need some ideas. Nothing wrong with that. That's what a community does. They support each other. And we'll hopefully spin it along those lines. So go with that premise. And but we also know that it can be potentially a very abused way to handle things, unfortunately. And sadly, too. So let's go back to our fellow here with the patient. Hopefully we didn't hurt him too badly. And let's just continue from this slide for a moment.
The women's dry release, fit for comfort in all conditions. It dries fast.
I'm not even sure why I put that up there. So I'll remember why I did that in a moment, but we'll go past that in a moment. It's the same premise that we've been talking to. Now, I say next semester, that's misleading. It's deliberately misleading. If I had you for a second semester, if I had you for 2 semesters, and I kind of wish I did, a, a new applications assignment from day one would be designing a training program that actually incorporates at least 2 technologies. We would do that together. And we're not, obviously, because they only assign one course to your program for this. But I would, in fact, if anybody wants to talk to me about working with me on those things, just to kind of play around, how valuable would that be? Or if you want to get something together with your colleagues without me, that's fine too, to continue this kind of conversation. So the next semester is never going to happen by way of Stony Brook, but it doesn't mean we can't continue the community by talking about that, or you can do it on your own without Dr. B. I'm fine with that. So instead, we go look at pages 387 and 88, and you say there's 9 application questions. I'm going to skip that. That's old. But we've already done discussions. And the goals for this are several, but I think I only picked 3 to highlight them. To recognize how technology affects training, to evaluate those inventions for their pluses and minuses, and to consider how they may be incorporated into your planning. And that goes back to what we've already spoken about. Now, what you're seeing here, I'm just deliberately doing this, and this is a bare minimum. We're going to come back to this next week more carefully. This is what we call a futures wheel. It's a very basic if-then graphic. It's intended to help you solidify your if-thens. If you punch me in the nose, then my nose will bleed. And then I'll punch you back, maybe. And your nose will bleed. And then we both get in trouble. That's really if-thens. And in this case, we put a future in the middle. We're going to say that web-based approaches to training will increase. In my mind, that there's no doubt that they're happening as we speak. Now, what are futures that are going to emerge from that? Hear the word. There are multiple arrays of futures that will emerge from this, from web-based approaches to training. And let's take a look at some of them. There'll be analysis. People will be worrying about how do you analyze these and how do you align them with your goals. There are people who will start to think about, well, we don't like a full-blown approach to this. We want to blend it. And what would that mean? And will people be ready to do this? And a lot of people we know would be, and a lot of other people would say, I have no idea how to do this, and I don't want to know how to do this. The CBA stands for Collective Bargaining Units. Will every union be okay with being forced to be in web-based approaches? Now you can see there's other circles here with no arrows because I couldn't fit them on the PowerPoint. So rhetorical question, how will assessment of readiness, what future emerges from that? If we got to figure out how we know whether people are ready. Well, some won't be ready, and some will. So what do you do with the people who are ready, and what do you do with the people who are not? Some unions are going to say, okay, let's negotiate that. Some will say, we want nothing to do with this. And what will you do about that? And so you can see that the ripple, the rock in the middle of the puddle here, talks about a potential, probable future. And what you need to do is think about what the probable futures of the probables are in order for you to consider what training approaches you'd like to use to have a technology base to them. And to recognize their cross impacts. Alexa just told me to take out the garbage. That's my wife. She's not Alexa, but somehow she programmed that into Alexa, if you heard it. Anyway, what are the cross impacts? A probable future is that, for example, a diversity of workforce and capacities will be affected by that. Now, how would you write objectives for them? Who would the participants be? How would a union respond to that? A probable future means you're going to need some experts who know how to instructionally design these things. I'm getting pretty good at that, but I don't think there's that many people who can yet do this. What would the objectives look like? Who would the participants be? How would the union work towards it? So I've shown you two futuring devices that we're going to get into in more depth in the next couple of weeks. And then, like we've done PMI, I noticed Evan used a PMI in his midterm, and I applaud him for that. What are the pluses of these innovations? What are the minuses? What's interesting to know more about them? I left that out off the chart, but I probably should have kept that there. Which leads us to considering how these may be incorporated into your own planning, again, for your end of the year assignment. What would your overall goal be? What strategies would you need to have that goal come into play? Who would be responsible for it? When would you put it into place? What unpreferable futures would kick out? And how would you handle them? What do you need? How would you evaluate? That's a pretty important chart, even though it looks kind of bare bones, because it forces you to systematically consider the futures that you're considering as you begin to play with your last assignment. So really what we're talking about is welding watch my hands again, welding your probable future with your preferred. Now, if there's a gap, you can see my little face between one fist and the other. If there's a gap that big, that's a problem, because what you want to do is align them as best you can. If they're not aligned, then preferred future suffers and the probable future takes over. And that's it for tonight. Okay. So there's I've talked a lot, and I'm hoping that most of it makes sense to you. Tomorrow night, I'll be answering any questions if anybody would like to get on at 6 p.m., as well as I will be offering up guidelines for what this last assignment is going to be about. And when you have the discussion question for this week, you need to read Chapter 8. Probably go back to Chapter 4 as well. Okay. And I have two more words for you. Most of you won't care, but here it comes. Go Yankees.